Welcome to Authors Night
Oh,
with the East Hampton Library. This event is generously sponsored by CIB Private Wealth Management, the Hilaria and Alec Baldwin Foundation, Patty Kenner, Barbara and Stephen Heyman, Michelle Tortorelli, and Tom Kearns, and Janet C. Ross. We are pleased to present Michael Eric Dyson being interviewed by Khephra Burns. At the end of this interview, there'll be a Q&A. So we ask that you please type your questions into the chat window, and we will address the questions at about the 40-minute mark in tonight's interview. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Khephra Burns.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon to all of you who have joined us. My name is Khephra Burns, and I have the privilege of introducing and speaking with today the eloquent, sagacious, preeminent public intellectual, raconteur, provocateur, and champion of truth, justice, and the aspirational American way. Dr. Dyson is a Vanderbilt University professor, ordained minister, author of umpteen books, cultural critic, and also whenever he's a good friend of mine, whenever my wife Susan Taylor calls him, he's there. Whenever I call him, I can't find him. but as the older folk used to say up in my neighborhood, he's a personal friend of mine. So, so today we're going to get into his most recent book, Long Time Coming, and I'm sure some of you at least will recognize that the title is taken from Sam Cooke's prophetic lament and hopeful civil rights anthem, A Change Is Gonna Come. I believe this is Dr. Dyson's 23rd book. I lose count sometimes because, as he says, he writes books like rappers write hooks. so Long Time Coming is a sustained meditation on the current moment of racial reckoning that has come in the wake of George Floyd's murder. And it's couched in a series of letters to just a few of those who are representative of the thousands who have died at the hands of police, and when not directly, then killed by the complex of interlocking system of racial oppression that is a part of. Many of us know, but perhaps few of us have had it laid out in such detail. But as they say, let's call their names. Elijah McClain, Emmett Till, Eric Gardner, Breonna Taylor, Hadia Pendleton, Sandra Bland, and Reverend Clementa Pinckney. Welcome, Dr. Dyson.
The Reverend Dr. Professor Khephra Burns. As you can see, he is not only sartorially elevated and edified, he has a megawattage intellect and a generosity of tongue that belies his youthful demeanor and his ability to pivot between and toggle among a multiplicity of disciplines with equal felicity and remarkable genius. So I'm so honored to be here with him today, and his lovely bride, the Queen of Black America, save one person, Susan Taylor, and she is my mother figure. That means Khephra is my father, but he's only like 2 years older than me. But that means he's a prodigy. And Susan Taylor, my dear and beloved mother and friend. She has abandoned me, alas, to the COVID-19 wiles, but I remain a faithful servant of hers. She'll smack me after this is over. But I celebrate both of them for the incredible contributions they make to our culture. So thanks a lot for hanging out with me.
Okay, that was a good attempt to run out the time, but I'm going to get right into the questions. So there was
darn.
So in the book, you write, there's a, and let me just you talk about Black anybody but especially, you know, a young Black anybody from Black
Mhm.
anywhere doing Black anything on any given Black night could be Elijah McClain or Eric Garner or Oscar Grant or Breonna Taylor.
Right.
It could be any of us. And
Right.
how does the stress of that affect affect our health and how we move about in America, given that vulnerability?
No, it's a great point. And the fact that any of us at any moment could be that person, could be a hashtag or a video recorded martyr for the movement, even against our will or desire, means that we live with enormous stress. And it's a great place to talk about and to begin, as this younger generation has taught us, especially older people, about self-care. I don't think the older generations were very good at that. I mean, Susan Taylor was a pioneer of that, always quoting Mahatma Gandhi, who said that, "Oh, my love, if I don't take care of myself, I can't take care of you." So I think that Susan Taylor and others of her ilk were highly sensitive to that, but the rest of us ain't know nothing about that, right? And when we think about the overexposure to the traumatizing videos or recordings by miracle of the cell phone, as much as that does us good by showing to the broader society that we're not making stuff up and that these offenses are real, it is traumatizing to us to have to watch them. They are essentially part of the pornography of Black death, the cinema of Black mortality. And these are snuff films, seeing the last moments of Black life recorded, the last moments of Black breathing, evaporating before our very eyes, time and again, through a kind of digital loop that corrals us within the circumference of its devastating witness. And so there's no question that it is painful to realize that not only we see these films, we could be these people on these films, and that no matter what we do, we can't seem to stop it. Your eloquent roll call of figures, Reverend Clementa Pinckney, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, and as you said, the list goes on and on and on. And so at any given moment, we are susceptible to that kind of, harassment, the hurt, the trauma, the pain, or the death. And so it's an enormous weight on the shoulders of Black people. And I end by saying, and you know this, Mr. Burns, that the price we pay in our bodies for racial hostility and racial animus is real. Mm-hmm. Blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, the overall physical maladies we endure because we have to suppress, some of us, the rage and the anger that we feel, the hostility that is directed toward us, and our responses to it, trying to maintain and navigate and negotiate through that is extremely difficult. And so in part, I wanted to write this book to try to let some of that steam off and to address some of that rage in hopefully a productive fashion.
And it's pretty comprehensive. I mean, each of these letters that you write to, posthumously to these martyrs, as you call them, gives you an opening to recount and elaborate on the entire history that has led us to this point. You just mentioned in the book that between 2005 and 2012, cops killed 2 Black people a week. Now, I don't know if that's more than the numbers of folks who were lynched in America every week during the 1930s and 40s, but that's right. A lot of people dead. And the vulnerability knows no class. You could be rich and famous and still end up Black and dead. And that perverse vulnerability that you describe, I think, is the whole point of terrorism. So how is this any different than terrorism?
That's so eloquently articulated. Why didn't I have you as my co-author to have said that? At least my ghostwriter. I think somebody's calling me. I'm going to have to decline that call. But you're so right in the sense that it is an act of terror. These are acts of terror. this is an extraordinary, terrorizing experience. As you said, the arbitrary character on any day at any given time with the kind of surprise, as the great Black preacher Caesar Clark said, ambushed by the unexpected. And so terror at that level is being ambushed by the unexpected and fearful about what might happen, even if you begin to expect it. You know, when you're on the plane, they say, put your seatbelt on, because this might be some unanticipated turbulence or some turbulence you didn't know was coming. Well, that means you knew some turbulence was coming. And then the turbulence that was coming, you still couldn't do nothing about it, right? And so we know that it is an act of terror. Fast terror and slow terror, as I describe in the book. Fast terror, bombs dropping. Kids, you know, who are, Black people who are murdered. The ways in which we live in rat-infested homes and asbestos in walls and buildings that are horribly unhealthy. Slow terror, going to school and getting kicked out at 6 and 7 and 8 years old. Teachers questioning whether we wrote papers or not, whether our home life is sufficient to give us a foundation for education in the nation. So what we might call microaggressions, so that the slow and fast terror operates are equally effective in devastating us, one over a longer trajectory, another one much shorter in its explosive finality. But we are living in states of suspended and agonizing terror, where we are victims of a kind of racial hostility that is hardly relieved by whatever measures we put forth, whether we're trying to deal with the police reform, whether we're talking about dealing with the Karens in the neighborhood, we minding our own business, and you trying to stop us from eating barbecue in the park in Oakland, one of your former parts of the world, hanging out. And what's more un-American than dividing Black people from barbecue? You know, it could be healthy, but dadgummit, it's un-American. So the thing is that, drinking water, drinking lemonade, going into Starbucks, or being at Yale University, and the like, and on and on and on. And the point is that we are continually subject to vicious forms of assault, of insult, of offense, of being vulnerable, of being, wiped out off of the face of the earth for no other reason than we are Black and breathing. Mm-hmm. And that, my friends, is a highly contagious form of obnoxious terror to which Black people are routinely subject.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to hit this just one more time and move on to something else. But we want to talk about, the other of the two pandemics, and that is the police violence. And you called it, you said that the police are in large part the violent enforcers of white supremacy. Now, a number of historians of policing in America have drawn a direct line of descent from the slave patrols. And you write that while modern police departments are not exact replicas of the slave patrols, they share a legacy. Actually, my interpretation, my words, a pledge to protect and serve property and the interest of property owners, and the containment and control of Black bodies, which were property. And then what happened when property ceases to operate as intended? It's allowed to rust, or else just dispensed with. So just carrying that metaphor a little further. So it's not necessary for explicit policies to be handed down from generation to generation in police departments, when attitudes will affect the same kinds of outcomes.
That's exactly right. No, it's so powerful. Again, you've hit the nail on the head, and all of you in America who are watching see why he's one of the greatest poets, analysts, thinkers, and editors we have in this nation. And you're so right. By extending that metaphor of property, rust out, wither away, certain elements of that property. We are fictions of American imagination, the property of people who mean us no good and constantly subject us to harm. And like you said, it ain't got to be an explicit articulation of vicious intensity. and it ain't got to be something that was intended with everybody to know. The efficacy of white supremacy is this systematicity, its systemic origin, its systematic perpetuation. It don't need nobody in the machinery, as they used to call it, deus ex machina, a ghost in the machine. You don't need nothing like that. You just need the machinery itself, and it's self-perpetuating, like they used to think in the 18th, 19th century, that stuff that machines could go on forever and all that. So, or certain kinds. So yeah, it is true that being owned as property, being seen as things, being treated as chattel, as Dr. King talked about, the thingification of Black life, all of that renders us, persona non grata. Sorry to throw all these Latin words at you, but we got to do that instead of saying MF and SOB. But the thing is that we are especially and acutely vulnerable to histories of exploitation that through colonialism and imperialism and the crass and gross reduction of us to things and cogs in the machinery of white supremacy and the property of dominant white culture. And I was at a thing earlier today, and somebody said, well, it's probably mostly white male supremacy, not women. Read the book, They Were Her Property, since you brought up property. Mm-hmm. And they said some of the white women were colder and crueler than the white men. And it wasn't no Me Too movement on the plantation. Wasn't nobody, resolving the white men's rape of Black female bodies. And white women were complicit in that deleterious and unjust arrangement. Mm-hmm. So property signifies in a multiple directions simultaneously. And it does suggest to us that we were reduced to something beneath the level of humanity, seen as owned by white brothers and sisters, and denied the opportunity to exercise agency politically, but we kept on finding ways to exist nonetheless.
Yeah, so we're gonna come back to Karen and Becky in just a minute, but first, just along the lines of property, you point out in the book that the lone cop that was indicted in the raid that murdered Breonna Taylor was indicted because he endangered Breonna Taylor's white neighbor and her property.
Right,
that's why,
right.
But in theft, you answer the white and Black condemnations of destruction of property and occasional Black looters among protesters by pointing to a long history of a nocturnal political economy. You call it the political economy of the night, wherein Black people not only stole back their time and freedom, but the fruits of their otherwise uncompensated labor from those who had first looted them.
Right. Yes, sir.
I gotta tell you, Michael, this reminds me of something I ran across recently about early American psychology, and where white psychologists had come up with this syndrome called drapetomania.
Oh yes,
drapetomania, where that's how they explained. It was supposed to explain why some Black people would inexplicably want to steal themselves away from their owners. Which is hilarious. Which is hilarious. So you posit Black theft answering white theft as the political economy of the night. But there's more to the political economy of the night, than just that. So let me let you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, that's hilarious how you bring that up. And instead of kleptomania, I guess we can call it kleptomania, because we kept ourselves away from that madness. And we stole ourselves away from what they were doing. We stole back their property, which was ourselves. So there was a contradiction between our ego and our self-identification as agents of our own humanity and being reduced to a cog in their machinery. So hopefully we were always going to win with asserting our humanity and our personhood. But no, you're so right. And like you said before, I meant to mention it, and I'll mention it very briefly here, with the kind of, police forces in this country, right? In British culture is different, but over here, 1703, 1704, starting in Virginia, that's what they were slave patrols. That's what they were doing, trying to house us, trying to control us, trying to harness us, harass us. And, you know, if we didn't have the right passes, arrest us, sometimes kill us. And then the white masses would be upset and sue in court for killing their own, you know, for their animals, their human beings, their property, and, you know, desecrating it, or sometimes murdering us, but still at the level of property. But yeah, there's no doubt about the political economy at night. And I named it that because, you know, the white masters would be like, man, they ain't doing no dang work during the day, but nighttime come, them bugs come alive. Them people come alive. Well, you know, they should have been listening to Ray Charles. The nighttime is the right time. So, and it was the right time for us. They said that the night was the Negroes, and they didn't say Negro, daytime. That the night was the daytime that white folk enjoyed. It was the nighttime for Negroes. Well, guess what? Because we didn't want y'all, you know, putting us to work all day from sun up to sundown, from Cane Sea to Cane Sea, and working us. And black people slowing down. You know, black people were like breaking the legs of the animals so that they couldn't trot out the soil and stuff. They breaking the instruments so that they couldn't use them. And master, I don't know, it just broke. And then old Kyle Bessie over there, I don't know what happened to her. So Negroes were finding what they call everyday forms of resistance, spitting in greens and other forms of fecal matter floating in there.
In the pie.
In the pie, Doc, in the pie. Miss Octavia Spencer, what's up?
Right.
So that's the help you need. So at the same time, and sometimes they would abort babies. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my God and be free. So Political Economy at Night talks about the degree to which black people seized upon darkness under cover of night to go fishing, to go hunting, to go visit their girlfriends and boyfriends and their loved ones, and to go to church. You know, I wonder, we didn't do no statistical analysis. How many Negroes were going to church and how many is going to see their woman? Look, Jesus, I love you, Jesus, but it's a choice between you and my girl. Yeah. I would just say, but I'll make sure she says, oh God, we love thee anyhow.
Well, so that's how those spirituals turned into the blues.
that is so ingenious and so true. It is so true. Yeah. They said, yeah, going from God to mama.
but also the same political economy of the night was responsible for, I mean, you know, starting with itinerant bluesmen and then these reviews of artists that were bussed, you know, from Detroit to Chicago to Harlem, and all of that actually turned regional black genius into a national black culture that then became American culture. So you talk about, it's not just stealing back our time, but it also birthed a large segment of American culture.
Yeah, that's brilliantly put. And that's what we did, you know, roaming, foraging, looking, questioning, questing, seeking, all of those, you know, activities were enacted within the context of our musical and our cultural explorations. And as you said, the itinerant blues man and woman, and figuring out, you know, the transformation of those spirituals into secular song, but expressing complaint and grief and desire and hope for a better world. Just one was in the temple and one was in the sanctuary and one outside, but they both got the same desire to be free from impediments, obstacles, and encumbrances. And some were getting, you know, liquor, and some were trying to get high on the Spirit of God, but both of them trying to escape the horror and the tragedy that lay before them. But in the night, they were able to exercise, or at least maximize, their desire to be free and to resist. And some of them would run away at the night. Some of them wouldn't come home in scare quotes there. Some of them created opportunities of kinship and familial ties that were otherwise denied to them to reinforce them. Part of what Carol Stack, the anthropologist, calls fictive kin. You ain't even related to them by blood, but you claim them as members of your own community and family. So a lot of that was going on at night. And then after that, after enslavement, as you said, blues, jazz, church life was at night, partying was at night. People were taking advantage of that in Black cultures to expand opportunities and to direct vocabularies of, self-expression into the world.
You talk about that expansion of opportunities, and you frame it as the Black next and the white again, and the Black next is a kind of vacuum that draws us onward into our unfolding, or it's a dissatisfaction with the status quo that drives us to create the next thing that we create, right? But there's always a white again that's in opposition to that. You know what I mean? There's always that resistance, that opposition. And we know the white again, because how many times have you heard us say not again?
or make America great again. Right.
That's another again.
That's another again. But no, I tried to juxtapose and show the opposition between, the Black next, because the greatest key word in Black creativity is next. Oh, you stole this, we got something next. Oh, you're ripping off trying to spirituals, we got the blues. You got the blues, we got jazz. You got jazz, we got rock and roll, R&B. So hip hop. Now they ain't stole hip hop so far. So it's hard to come up with some of that stuff. Eminem is doing good for the most part. It's still brothers and sisters right about now. Mm-hmm. So we might be able to hold on a little longer. But the point is, and of course we're doing it with jazz and so on. But the point is that I'm not only in music are we creating the next thing that was appropriated and absorbed and denied its legitimate, authentic bearing within our own cultural context, where it had a different significance, a different symbol, a different meaning. Well, it's not only in terms of the musical creativity and artistic imagination, it's also when it comes to dealing with a means of expressing our desire for freedom. So social justice quests, the next thing, the next struggle, the next march, the next leader, the next incarnation of our determination to be emancipated. But that Black next, which allows us to continue to create in the midst of appropriation, denial, or the attempt to eradicate us. On the other hand, as you said, the white again, they want the same. No, we don't want nothing different. We want the same thing. We just want different expressions of it. But again, we want domination again. We want colonialism again. We want white hegemony again. We want white superiority again. We want white supremacy again. We want the Confederacy again and again and again, trying to reproduce the pathology of white domination of Black life in as many ways as possible. So those things are butting heads constantly, the Black next and the white again.
And if you can't kill it by opposing it, then you appropriate it.
Right, exactly.
Right. And
make money off of our stuff, our struggle and trouble that we created to get away from y'all.
Right. So folks, you're gonna have to read the book, because there's just too much in here for us to hit on in an hour. But I want to I don't want to miss the opportunity to have you expound on cancel culture, which you write is a proxy for white supremacy. And I read that and I was reminded how abused children sometimes grow up to be abusers. But talk about cancel culture and how it mimics white supremacist arrogance.
Yes, sir. No, that's a great point. And I think the great theoretician Susan Taylor said, hurt people. And that, to me, you've been canceled, you trying to cancel. Now, look, I don't mean cancel culture the way Donald Trump and all these right-wing people talk about it. Let me just be real clear. It's cancel culture. They're doing a horrible thing. It's the woke mob. All right, I ain't talking about all that, even though I got my own particular criticisms of whatever manifestation of, freedom and emancipation we might generate. That's just, we have to do that. But I ain't talking about Josh Hawley and Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump and all these people. That ain't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the inclination to not understand that life is nuanced and complicated and complex, that zero tolerance is a right-wing ideology. It ain't no left-wing and progressive notion. And mostly, zero tolerance was directed against Black people, right? We kick them out of school. Zero tolerance. One offense and you're done. Look at their broken window theory. You break a little window and you're going to mess up eventually and steal a car. So we're going to get you at the broken window. I mean, this cancel culture is borrowing from people who were enemies to, or at least opposed to us. And, you know, the means that young people have to use social media. I mean, now when we were coming up, wasn't no Facebook. Like I said, we had to face the book and read it. We ain't no Twitter. We were a Twitter with excitement at hanging out. Swipe left. That's only because we were trying to miss somebody with our car, not on no darn app on social media. So the thing is that social media has been wonderful in many ways. It has done, you know, you can do in now 10 minutes what you used to take for a week to do. Go to the library, and I love libraries where you are. Go to the library, to go to the periodical, the reader's catalog. They don't even know nothing about that. The periodical literature, they don't even know what that is. Look it up. In 1957, there was a magazine article in the Atlantic Monthly on this day. They don't know what 186.7, they think that's a radio station. They don't know nothing about that. Could be social science or political science. Those books behind you, the Dewey Decimal System. I mean, there's something now. I know I'm nostalgic for that. I crave that. I love the smell of pages, the papyri. I love to see them decay and yellow at some points, even though I like to keep them fresh. But the point is, I like the physical intensity of literacy. But now you can digitize a library and you can be, you know, surfing through reams and gigabytes of information that used to take you days and days and days. And that's a beautiful thing. However, as James Brown would say, house and ever, the problem is that with social media, we also use it to hurt and harm people. We bully people. We get mad at people and we cuss them out, so to speak. There is no balance. You made a statement. Let me make a counter statement. Let me make an argument. You make a statement about somebody. You just allege something. You ain't got to have no proof. You just saying people want to kill them. They want to destroy them. They want to get rid of them. And it's not a context that is conducive to self-reflection. So I say it's white supremacy by other means, because white supremacist impulse is to eradicate, to destroy. The best of Black culture has not been to do that. Now, we do want to hold people accountable. Now, we do want to say, let's do the right thing. We don't want to just let folks get off the hook. But there is a character of redemption to our national outlook as people. There is something to be said for understanding that sometimes people mess up and you got to let them fess up so they can get dressed up and then reemerge as a fruitful citizen in the culture. But when you're doing the cancel culture, one mistake and you're done. If Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X were here today, they'd have been trying to cancel them brothers for real, for one reason or another. Martin Luther King Jr., because of peccadillos and particular personal, interests, shall we say. Malcolm X, because he might have been too, rigid and, patriarchal for some. But the point is, not that you can't be critical of Martin Luther King Jr. or Malcolm X. We should be, as we should be critical of all of us. But to erase somebody, to cancel them, right? Not looking over the whole scope of their lives. As Jesse Jackson said, you can't judge it by one box score of one game. If y'all, you got to look at the whole season. What's your average? And then not only your season, look at your career. Mm-hmm. You might have had a messed up season, but your overall batting average could be 350. You could be the leading hitter of all time. And if you're the leading hitter of all times, that means you struck out 7 of 10 times. That's the best of them. Mm-hmm. And so for me, cancel culture is the impulse to legislate and to organize resistance to certain ideas and peoples in ways that are not as gracious, as understanding, and as complex and nuanced and as comprehensive as otherwise it should be. Let me give you one quick example. So I got called from Pharrell, the great singer and songwriter and producer, and he's from Virginia. And he said, look, the Black elected officials over here want to have a conversation with you because Ralph Northam, the governor, has dressed up in blackface. And we not now, 20 years ago. So we want to get rid, we want to try to figure out, do we get rid of his brother? Now they called me and I said, heck no. I said, let me tell you what. I said, first of all, just be strategic. There ain't nothing better than forgiving a white man his sins, right? Not if they not crazy stuff now. And he will be so grateful to you that he will be committed to doing some of the very things you want. Now, here's what could happen. You get rid of this dude, the next white guy, of course, he ended up being fooling around with blackface too. I mean, this is not exactly what we meant when we said we want black faces in high places, y'all. That's not what we were talking about. So the thing is that when you get to the white man, you go, hey, did you do blackface? No. Did you do anything that was horrible? No. Are you interested in helping black people? No. So the thing is, you could get somebody here who didn't use the N-word or who didn't use blackface, but they won't be committed in the same way that a forgiven white man who's been redeemed, politically speaking, turn around. And what did that man do? He, first of all, he forgave 10,000 felons their offenses so that they could vote again. And you know a disproportionate number of those were black. Then he started dealing with healthcare. Then he started dealing with black women's issues. The man might as well have been a little Abraham Lincoln and a mini LBJ because he was so grateful for how black people saved his behind that he was committed to trying to make a difference. And I'm saying to you, had we canceled him, and first of all, who among us ain't made no mistake? Now, 20 years ago, look, now if he was doing blackface last year, now we got a problem. But if the man did it 20 years ago, now what's more scary about that, or most scary, is that he was a physician. He was doing it in medical school. Like, what were you doing? Singing some Al Jolson before you operated? But the point is that in the latter part of his career, since then, he's done some tremendous stuff. So we have to judge people based on a far more humane standard and be more strategic about it. And first, and finally, understand that we don't want to be canceled ourselves. You mean for 30 years I did something right, I messed up one time, and you just want to dispose of me? That's white supremacist thinking. You are no good. You have been spoiled. You are not helpful and productive. And there's so much judgment on social media, Black Twitter in particular, that is so hateful and heinous. And I was old enough, and so are you, to remember when they had their version of canceling Whitney Houston. She went to the Soul Train Music Awards and they were booing her. They were trying to cancel her. You ain't black enough. Huh. I guess she showed you just how black she was. Y'all thought she wasn't black. She was singing all them Americana songs and getting down with the get down in a fundamental way. So my point is, then what you got to do, uncancel after you cancel her. So be more judicious, more fair-minded, and more open to the possibility that all of us make mistakes. We use those mistakes to learn from and then move forward. Yes, some things are so egregious, ain't no coming back. But for the most part, that ain't true. And we got to figure out what to do. Even Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't trying to cancel Bull Connor. He's trying to cancel white supremacy. But he ain't trying to go to his crib and beat him. We must forgive and love our white brothers and sisters and redeem them with blood. That's why some niggas said that's why we're trying to cancel them, because that's crazy. But the point is, we ought to have some understanding behind all of that we do.
Yeah. I want to, I wonder how much of our frustration over reckoning and justice that have been too long in coming, that has caused or engendered this cancel culture, because it seems sometimes like the arc of moral justice, the arc of the moral universe could use some equivalent of a arc bending black hole gravity or something, so it's just not coming fast enough for some folk. I want to talk about white comfort and some other things, but I think I better check in with Steve just to make sure that we don't have questions from the audience yet. If we don't, I'm going to move on to white comfort. Steve, we got any questions from the audience?
Yep, sure we do. I will read, let's see, we have a question from an attendee. Kevin asks, could Dr. Dyson share his views on the current fixation white people have in instituting laws to eliminate critical race theory, or any aspect of telling the true elements of America's racial history?
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. There's a more elegant way to say that. Look, the attempt to go after critical race theory, first of all, they don't even know what it means. Critical race theory ain't what you think it is. It's a specific legal doctrine and theory generated by law professors in the 80s and 90s, some in the late 70s, but mostly in the 80s and 90s, trying to theorize about systemic inequity and not individual bigotry. And so they were trying to say that the perpetuation of legacies of inequity are rooted in institutional dynamics and systemic expressions that are not resolved through individual prejudice or the lack thereof. Even if you ain't prejudiced, don't call nobody no name. There are structural realities that continue to prevail. Now, you're going to turn that into the bête noire, and there's one white guy. You saw the story. Is it Christopher? I'll get his name, Ruffalo, whatever. And he was looking around one day at some of the literature, including the 1619 Project and Ibram Kendi, and he kept seeing references to critical race theory. So this white guy figured out, I can use this as shorthand for all the wrong thinking and the wokeacity that is out there, and I'm going to use that to stigmatize and demonize the attempt to wrestle with race through history. And now we call it critical race theory. No, it's called history. It's called engaging with the real and true reality that confronts us. But many white brothers and sisters would rather avoid it than confront it. So ain't nobody teaching critical race theory to sixth graders. Stop it. They ain't teaching it to 10th graders. Stop it. That's not what they're doing. What they are trying to do at their best, these teachers, is remind America where we came from. And so many white brothers and sisters don't want to hear the truth of their racial animus, the truth of what their grandmothers and grandfathers did to us, what their mothers and fathers did to us. So they want to outlaw the teaching of history. And what trips me out, the very people that say Negroes are dumb and lazy and don't want to study are dumb and lazy and don't want to study, don't want to read their own history, don't want to grapple with the contradictions of that history, and don't want to read the 1619 Project. That's why they've been threatening Nicole Hannah-Jones. And this 1619 is a reactionary response, to be redundant to a degree, but it's a reaction and a response to the attempt to make certain that we address the historic legacy of inequality, the institutional manifestation of inequity, and the degree to which oppression is reproduced on a daily basis in systemic fashion. So I think we got to continue to stand up to it, to point out the contradictions, especially given the way that many people try to deploy critical race theory and have no daggum idea what they're talking about. That's just like being mad at, I'm mad now at relativity theory by Einstein, and don't even know what it means. Don't even know what energy equals mass times whatever the way, squared, MC squared. So we don't even know what that means, So, but we're going to go around jumping on Heisenberg and, quantum mechanics and stuff. You don't even know what that means, but you mad at it and trying to use it as a whipping boy. So I think we have to continue to fight forward and illumine people even as we resist that nonsense.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into the subject that you address in the book on in one of the chapters, white comfort. And the greatest white comfort and privilege is not having to know anything about Black people.
Yes, that's it, man.
About Black life, while we have to know everything about them just as a matter of survival.
As a matter of survival, sir. No, you're absolutely right. And, it is, and this is why, again, to all social movements now to say, I'm uncomfortable. I don't feel good. Discomfort is the basis often for knowledge and growth. Mm-hmm. You can't be comfortable and like, oh, yes, I'm going to take a broad re-examination of my culture and be comfortable with it. Yes, I feel good. I feel good that knowing now that Granny was out there throwing rocks at the Little Rock Nine, and my mother and father were doing horrible misdeeds in the name of protecting America, but I'm not uncomfortable at all. It doesn't make me feel bad at all. Or to see Granny using certain epithets and so on. So come on. Comfort cannot be the litmus test for justice or for the appropriate response to learning. When I'm in class, I hope my students are uncomfortable with some of the things I'm saying, some of the insight I'm trying to bring, some of the things I'm trying to make them see, because that discomfort can make them reflect upon issues that they thought had been settled in their own minds and trying to grapple with them. But white comfort, is the way in which, white brothers and sisters don't have to learn about us, don't have to study us. As Fannie Lou Hamer said, the mistake they made was they put us behind them. And so we had to learn everything about them. Hey, don't talk to Master today because he kind of wilding out. No, don't ask for that raise today. He ain't in a good mood. Oh, yeah, he in a good one. Go on and ask him stuff. So we had to learn for our survival, as you said, what whiteness was, how to take the temperature of whiteness. White folk don't even know how to take the temperature of blackness. They ain't even interested in it. And their survival doesn't depend upon it, unless they, are in certain extreme situations within our community. So you're absolutely right. White comfort has been the basis of denying the legitimacy of social change and transformation and the personal existential challenges that are afoot and the changes that need to be made if we're going to have a better society.
And the stress, our stress of always constantly having to consider and accommodate white comfort.
Yes.
Always.
All the time.
And you write posthumously to Sandra Bland, and you're talking about white comfort. And, there's nothing she could do. It's certainly nothing a large black man can do to make some white people feel comfortable. Like you said, it would take an ontological makeover. You would just have to change into something else, a puppy dog or I don't know what.
Right, a butterfly or something.
So Sandra Bland gets pulled over for failing to signal. And if you don't signal to white folks that you're not threatening, they don't know. In their mind, you might go left,
I have to put that in my paperback edition. I'm gonna have to steal that right there, brother. That's so brilliant. That's right. We giving signals, and if we don't give signals, then they mad. And like you said, we might go left and go off, and then they're fearful because they think we might do to them what they done to us, but we ain't them kind of people. No. That's not what we do. And look, I'm sure you've seen it. I've seen the video recordings of white people with machetes running after cops, and they running and got guns on their hips. Or a white guy stole a cop car and was trying to mow down the cop, and he was running. He didn't shoot him. And yet we get stopped for a darn traffic light, like you said, like Walter Scott down in South Carolina, and 8 pieces of lead are fired at his back, 7 of which hit him, right, for no good reason. Eric Garner, he wasn't even doing Lucy's that day, so it's even worse. Or a $20 bill that George Floyd may not have even known was counterfeit. And then he's taken down for that. This is what our life is worth to so many people, nothing. And for the comfort of white ignorance, many of our white brothers and sisters go to extraordinary heights and profound extremes to protect and to preserve what they think is theirs.
Steve, what does our audience want to know?
We have, this is a question in regards to a follow-up, it looks like, to the CRT. As a follow-up, how then do we safeguard historical truth?
We got to. I want Mr. Burns to weigh in on that, but let me say it very briefly. Gore Vidal said we live in the United States of amnesia, and I say the theme song for that United States of Amnesia is by Barbra Streisand. Was too painful to remember. We simply choose to forget. So it's deliberate amnesia. It ain't just you walked in, can't remember. It's you don't want to know. This nation is addicted to memory on the one hand. 15,000 books on Abraham Lincoln. 15,000. Now he a bad boy, I'm saying, but daggone. Founding fathers, founding mothers, founding brothers, founding sisters, founding friends. The enormity of the literature on America for stuff that white brothers and sisters won't. Or they can't stop reenacting the Civil War. My God, lost the war, but won the battle of interpretation. The narrative battle in this country has been won by some nefarious forces. And so we've got to protect it by doing what 1619 Project did. But don't act like just because you do a scholarly attempt to demystify history, you ain't going to be attacked. You're going to be jumped on. And so we have to continually fight the textbook makers in Texas. Oh my God, Texas, arresting state legislators because they're trying to resist putting into a law legislation that is decidedly antithetical to democratic small d principles. And so, you know, we've got to call these things out. But when you do it and you talk about safeguarding history, please don't be misunderstood and don't misunderstand us. You might have to pay a tremendous price for that because the nation is pushing back. But Brother Burns, you're going to jump in.
Well, I can't add too much to that. Except to say that the reason we have Black history and the study and the scholarship in Black history is because we do not have a comprehensive, truthful American history. There should be one history that tells the whole truth. But again, that truth engenders a lot of white discomfort. So in the meantime, we have to read broadly and compare and contrast. I mean, that's what scholarship is. You know, you got thesis, antithesis, and a synthesis. You put the things together. But you know, I think again, it's the white discomfort that has pushed back. It's that again, you know, that again that has pushed back and stood in opposition to that.
Right. You know? No, amen. I agree with all that.
So, let's say, Steve, is there anything else? Because there's one last thing I want to hit. I don't want to run completely out of time.
At the moment, we don't have any questions in the chat at the moment. If anyone would like to ask a question, feel free to type it in the chat.
Great. So while we're waiting for someone to come up with any questions that they may have, what comes through in the book, Michael, is that despite everything, you say that Black people have more faithfully fulfilled the moral ambitions, political intentions, and social aspirations of democracy than many of their white peers. Absolutely. But then you write of a deep belief in the nation, a love that is persistent and unshakable. I don't know, man. I don't see American flags flying in Black neighborhoods the way they are in white neighborhoods. And while we don't want to confuse patriotism with jingoism, I wonder if our stance isn't a bit more pragmatic than love. You know, we love Black people. We love Black culture. We love and take pride in a history of overcoming. America has provided the context, but the context has been one of opposition, obstacle, and denial, that white again that you talk about. So I don't know, respond to that.
Yeah, no, as usual, you've put your finger on the pulse and, you know, you nailed it down. And yeah, I wasn't suggesting that there's, you know, when Martin Luther King Jr. made that distinction, now there is agape, and there is philia, and then there's eros. You know, he broke all that down. And I ain't talking about no eros for sure. I ain't even talking about philia, although we got that. We talking about agape. It takes God for some of us to try to love this nation, love the hell out of it. So we don't mean love like we got fellow feeling only, and that we, oh my, Jiminy Cricket, it's great. We ain't got Jimmy Stewart, John Wayne sensibilities. We got critique. That's why that's why white folk be thinking we don't love America. No, we love it so much we willing to tell the truth. That's how our love shows up. I'm gonna get in your face and tell you. What did James Baldwin say? I love America more than any nation in this world. That's why I reserve the right to criticize her perpetually. That's the love I'm talking about. I'm talking about engaging in a serious resistance to this historical amnesia and the misguided practices, as you said, of jingoistic or nationalistic. There's a difference between patriotism and nationalism. Nationalism says my country right or wrong. No matter what happens, we down with it. Patriotism in the best says, no, Now, America's a great nation, but it's got some stuff to do to get on the right track. And we got to tell the truth to the nation. You know what Chris Rock said? He said, Black people's relationship to America, he said, it's like your uncle put you through college, but molested you. So that's well, damn, okay, but oh my God, the price I paid for the opportunity I got. Yeah, think about that. So there's no question that we love America, but in a very pragmatic and powerful way. And Dr. King said, I ain't going nowhere. I built this nation. Black blood and black brawn and black steel and black muscle and black sinew and black intelligence erected this culture. We ain't gonna build a whole darn thing up to let somebody else take it. Like some women say, I ain't gonna make this Negro who he is over 25, 30 years and then leave him for another person.
Yeah.
It ain't happening, dog.
Yeah.
So
I think I'd agree that Black folk love democracy more even than a whole lot of white folk. But America and democracy are also not synonymous, and not
democracy and what? And
you talk about the nation teetering on the edge of a neo-fascist abyss, and I've been thinking lately that a pretty substantial segment of the American electorate has wagered that that they might do pretty well under fascism.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And that's why we got to continue to fight it. And we give lifeblood to democracy, small d. We give lifeblood to forms of governmental alliance. And look, there's a difference between administration and government. We ain't in love with no administrations. We be challenging them. Even the one led by our dear brother, Barack Obama. That's our responsibility as citizens. But having said that, the truth is that, yes, we got to talk about anti-imperialism. We got to talk about anti-colonialism. We forge connection internationally with global activists against white supremacy, and they thinking we the ones who ain't American. No, y'all ain't American. January 6th proved y'all are talking, blowing smoke out here. Y'all don't love the nation. Y'all don't love Blue Lives Matter. What happened to Blue Lives Matter on January 6th? Because the real religion in America is whiteness. The real patriotism in America is whiteness. The real glue that holds this nation together for so many white brothers and sisters is whiteness. What James Baldwin in '63 called a political fiction that projects the desires of the political unconscious that seeks to subordinate some to its will and bend others to its particularly awful acts. So that's the kind of thing I think that Black people are ingenious at contributing to this culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just one last thing. So, the point of this book and these letters are to address this current racial reckoning. Now,
right.
We all know we've been here before, and you even recount some of what you call mini awakenings of the past, and the backlashes and retrenchments that invariably follow. So, what makes this? You think this one's different? What makes this racial reckoning different? Do you think?
Yeah, well, we're gonna see if I'm right or wrong, but look, at least initially, excuse me, the number of white folk that got out of them streets was certainly dramatically different than before. And see, because it's one thing to be at the crib talking about it, putting a black box up on Instagram. It's another thing to put your white body on the front line. And think about it, of social resistance. Think about it. When Jacob Blake got shot in, was it Milwaukee, in the back by the cop? And then later on, that 17-year-old bigot killed two people, the young 17-year-old white boy who walked past all those cops. Right. Two white men lost their lives. Heather Heyer in Charlottesville lost her life. This is allyship at the highest level. The willingness to sacrifice one's life. That is, en masse, that's the numbers of white people who were protesting, joining Black Lives Matter in rural communities where there wasn't no Black people. And white folk out there, Black Lives Matter. This was a new moment. And I think it happened because, most of us were at home, or many of us were at home during the pandemic. So we could see the stuff crossing across our screens. If you at work all day and working, you might have, George Floyd or Facebook, but everybody You know, a lot of us were home, the ones who could afford to stay, and we watching these darn contraptions and these machines. And my God, look at what came across them. And then secondly, white folks saw they had their excuses taken away from them, right? Well, he must have been running. No, he was on the ground. Well, he must have been cursing the cops out. No, he was very polite. Well, he must have been belligerent. No, he was deferential to a fault. And so all the excuses were taken away because they saw a vulnerable Black man on the street with the sadistic intensity of Derek Chauvin, with his knee boring into his neck, into George Floyd's already mortally depressed column. And white folks said enough is enough. And I think it has made a difference, at least in the outpouring of allyship at the level of protest. Now, the question is, can it get translated into corporate dollars, into political will? At the same time we got that going on, we got people trying to rewrite the history books. We got folk who don't want any advance in terms of race. We see the demonization of 1619 and of critical race theory, and we see the white rebellion against the desire and the impulse and the demand for Black emancipation.
Well, hope is the substance of,
Right,
of hope right now.
Right.
But listen, get this book, everybody. I mean, it is beautifully, poetically written, beautiful prose. It's in depth. There's a lot to think about in here. So get this book. Thank you.
Sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, Khephra Burns, for making me sound like I said something worth listening to. And for folk to buy, I appreciate you so much. It's always good to have Black genius hanging out with you, and his lovely bride and great wife, the great Susan Taylor. Thank y'all for making the trek to the library, and sharing this time with me.